how are you all doing today? Let's talk about Aho, shall we? So, this is just going to be a video that I feel like I should have made a while ago, but is also something I think other people should do to just go over a series in retrospect and just talk about it because I feel like there's like a lot of people who can see this series and see it as like there's clearly not anything that's putting it above and into the echelons of a great mapping series. I think that's something that everyone can basically tell. But I kind of want to analyze why that is and how, if you're in this spot, how I think you can get to a position where you can make other things, like at the point where I'm at, where I'm making WLB, where even if for some reason none of you are watching it, you should watch it. It's better than Aho by a significant margin. It's something where I feel like I've expressed a lot more than I did like at all in Aho. So yeah, first addressing the elephant in the room. Yes, I am formally saying I'm not doing Aho anymore. Why is that? The reason for that is that I could do a whole new season because I released a prologue for it, but realistically, I basically just finished the season. So I don't think there's that much value in doing that. Uh, uh yeah, so where was I? Sorry. Something closed out. This is not scripted because I'm gonna be honest, I'm way too busy with WLB to script anything right now. So, and school is also a fun thing that I deal with. So instead, I'm just gonna freestyle this for an afternoon, leave my thoughts out, and if it helps y'all, dope. So yeah. Aho is not sticking around, and I'm fully canceling it now. There's a possible podcast I'm thinking of doing with some of my mapping buds, and maybe we can go over what season 3 would have been there. But I'm not going to do it now specifically, so I can save it for there. But yeah, season 3 was meant to be an ending, but not really anything that I had planned from the beginning. It's more because season 2 was not a good ending. And sure, let's not start there. Let's start from the beginning. So I'm just gonna have open episodes so I can like pull up any sort of examples, but mostly I'm just gonna be on a solid screen at this point. There's just probably gonna be a couple examples I'd like to pull up from previous videos. So first off, the map. The map is fine, and I think that kind of exemplifies everything about the map and also everything about the series. There is nothing interesting about it. And like it was the first map that I'd made that I was like, damn, that's visually appealing. I like that. But it's visually appealing just because it doesn't have any negative aspects per se, except for those white lines, which are just so thick on the text box. Why did I do that? And I guess maybe being one of the first-ish sepia war map color things, as I'm noticing now, that was part of it, but that's not really an interesting visual style, and also I was not at all the first one to do it, so I'm not going to claim it makes the series remotely original. So, and to me, honestly, that is fine. That is 0% what my issue with Aho is. I feel like a lot of people are in this situation where they feel like they need to make incredible visuals, and honestly, I would say you absolutely do not. If there's visual issues, if there's little things that you can tweak and make better with your knowledge and your time, that is what you should do. But going out of your way to learn something that is going to take a lot more effort to do things like animations or to get a 50k map, like, that is not at all necessary because at the end of the day, it's still just going to be looking at a map on YouTube. And once you've hit a certain echelon of being visually appealing enough, sure, it's dope, and I love to see maps that are just so stunning to look at, but your series stops being held back by your map at a certain point, and that's what I feel like people need to recognize when they're trying to go higher and higher and get these epic-looking maps, when in reality, the map's fine enough. You just kind of have to refine everything else in order to make a great series. And so the thing about let's go over Aho season 1 first because season 2 is a different beast. The first thing about season 1 is that there is no great overarching plot whatsoever. this is mostly because I didn't actually plan much of anything beforehand. I kind of was in this position where there had been a lot of series where I'd planned it beforehand and then looked back and said, oh, I don't like this. This is dumb. I don't want to do this. So I kind of just forced myself to start doing it before I actually had a materialized plot, which clearly ended in the plot being a lot more slapped together as it went on. And that's also why you can see a lot of the later episodes having different character than the earlier episodes, because there weren't really characters at all in the earlier episodes. It was just kind of a World War I simulation thing, and I feel like that's why most people ended up latching onto it, which is cool, I guess, but doesn't really, as a creator, give me any form of reward, because like I'm not doing anything interesting. Like there's a million other things you could see here that, I don't know, don't have stupid things where I don't know. You're not watching this for the realism of the simulation of the alternate history. That's not the point of it. This is not something that would happen, and the point of it is to use a previous situation and change it to use that as a playground for storytelling. And that is what I ended up completely dropping the ball on as it goes on. So, first, actually, there's... no, I'll talk about that when we get to Season 2, because I do have another point on the map. But, I think the most notable thing is what I did that is a nail in the coffin as to why Aho just kind of fell apart, is that I forced myself to make 10 episode seasons, and season 1 and season 2 were, neither of them were 10 episodes long. There were, like, in both of them, there were 3 to 4 filler episodes that had no real reason to exist. They were shorter than all the others, nothing happened, and I just kind of led up to the end. And this is a problem that I still kind of feel like I had with What Lies Beyond, because I may have or may not have had a 91 scene plan for the next episode, which was not at all realistic, and I needed to split it up into 3 more episodes, so it does tell me that I need help with pacing in general. But yeah, so that's another lesson that I've definitely taken away, and I think you should take away as well. If you do not feel like your story actually has enough to carry it across a big episode thing, it doesn't need to. Making a mini-series that's like 5 episodes, or even, as I've tried to experiment and failed to complete, doing a single episode thing, those are fine. Even, like, if your storyline isn't fleshed out enough to have that full situation, it doesn't mean it's a bad storyline. It just means that you shouldn't force it to be a movie when it can just be like a TV show, when it can just be a short story. That's okay. You can make it that. But don't force it to be overly long if there's just not enough interesting things between the start and the climax. Speaking of the climax, yeah, the plot of Aho is fine. I'm going to say this a lot, but that's kind of my summarization of what I feel about the series. There's nothing remarkable about it whatsoever, and that's... I'll get to that at the end as to my general takeaways, but there's nothing to stand out about this. First off, let's go over the characters. They are so inconsistent. Like, France's dialogue changes very significantly over the time. Like, I'm not going to pull up all the lines, but I feel like, yeah, France was awfully written to just never stick to any guns. Italy had no character. Britain had no character. No one had character except for, at best, Germany. And that character was just kind of not realized as anything but the villain until the final episode. Which, like, I had intended it to be, oh, you can take either side. But at the end of the day, it was very clear how I was writing it, who was going to win, and who was really the protagonist. So I just didn't at all develop Rosa's Germany, like, at all to be any sort of sympathetic character, again, until the very end, where I just kind of came up with something that felt fitting, but there wasn't any definitive reason for that, and that wasn't planned out the entire time, as that was Rosa's arc, because there wasn't really an arc. It was just kind of static the entire time. Let's see, who else are characters. Let me go on to future episodes because I forget. Map. I'm not giving you free advertising. There we go. Okay. Boom. Alright. Right, I needed to look at the map because I completely forgot who was in the wreckage of Austria-Hungary. Let's talk about Hungary, which is I said Rosa was the only character. I forgot about Hungary. Hungary is essentially the only character, and that's a problem that I had while writing it. You can see that by the character of Hungary and by the slowed disassociation with everyone and the losing of trust and everyone being betrayed, that is the arc that should be of a protagonist. But I did not give Hungary any screen time, so essentially you're left with this character who is essentially the protagonist, but you have at the end of season 1 they're not doing anything because they're not important in the end, so it just completely falls flat there. And yeah, the relation with Ukraine is another thing that was good. The few scenes I had on that were okay, and I'm happy with them as they stand, but I didn't develop that at all. And that was a massive problem that definitely made me feel a lot less invested in making it into the future because there was no character that was I need to finish this arc, because Hungary's arc was, I wanted to finish Hungary's arc, but there wasn't any real driving force to do so. As well, the other thing that I'm just now noticing because I'm remembering it, let's talk about the pseudo attempt at being realistic and completely failing. People pointed out a lot of problems of this would never happen in the series. I believe it was Enver Pasha, who I just threw in as the Ottoman Caliphate leader. Literally no idea who he was. I was just all right, who's important people in Ottoman Empire 1920? Okay, this guy, he will lead the revolution. I didn't do research, and that kind of killed the entire purpose of having a ruler's name in the box. Why even do that if I don't know who this person is? And that's true for a lot of them. I just chose a random person off Wikipedia without any knowledge of them, and I wasn't even sure if they were actually important people at all. They were just the only person from Moldova who had a Wikipedia entry in 1919, and I didn't know anything to do with them, so they kind of just got left as this not at all reflection of reality at all, and just a husk where I tried to pretend that I knew what was going on, even though all I was doing was just not emphasizing them whatsoever. Is there anything else that I'm noting about characters and plot as I'm looking at this screen? I don't think this is a major point that ruined it for me, but this is just me criticizing the series because I want to. What the hell were Portugal and Spain doing? Literally, did they do anything? I do not believe they did anything. Until what was it? Was it Portugal, Leon, ANCAP? What was that storyline? I don't know. But that's another thing where there's clearly space where I can put more developed storylines in, and I didn't use it, which is annoying and makes it a lot less space, especially when you just have this dead weight of a country that would clearly be more important than I don't know, who is someone who I emphasized a lot? The Cossacks, who I developed. That's not... I could totally have made an actual Spain and Portugal arc, and I did not. And that is something that drove me up a wall because, again, I was what do I do with these countries when there's the big war? Do they just sit back? And I made a random ANCAP revolution, but essentially the way you can look at it is that there's no Iberia in this universe at all because there's no development of it. And that's something that I have definitely felt is something that I haven't really needed to avoid it per se in WLB, but I will try to avoid as it goes on to have these just blank husks of regions where I do nothing with them, because that is not good, because you just lose a significant amount of character development potential. And then we can go through the rest of Aho season 1, but like at the end of the day, as I said, the plot ending was completely shambled together. And it was, I feel like, kind of fan servicey in that there wasn't any arcs that were finished. The only thing that actually ended up happening was I just gave a summary for the war that made all the alternate history nerds go crazy. But that doesn't really make me any more involved in it. And I don't think it made people any more involved with it either, considering no one really stuck around for any series afterwards on my channel. So that's kind of what I'm left with. Like, if you're gonna be the kind of person that I know a lot of the people who are subscribed to me are gonna say, why care about plot? You specifically, if my plot was good enough, I feel like you wouldn't be saying that because you would actually be sticking around. But at the end of the day, my plot is kind of an empty husk where you're just watching a map simulation at this point. Like, again, it wasn't awful. It wasn't something where I look at this plot and say it ruins everything, but it was specifically there and just sat there and it didn't help anything at all. And that's something that, again, like, you can tell, especially if we're talking mid-season 2, how little effort I'm putting into it, because I do not care about the series anymore, and I just want to get to that epic twist. Again, I'll go over that once we get to season 2, but, and I don't really put effort into it, specifically because there's not a plot, so there's nothing for me, there's no story for me to finish telling, which is, like, again, look at WLB, like, no spoilers, but, like, y'all, clearly, I have not given enough. There's more to be done. There's more to be finished in the plot, which is like, yeah, I want to finish that storyline, but I don't. There's nothing I want to do. I wanted to do in Aho again, except for that twist, which we will get to. That I essentially built the entirety of season 2 around at the end of the day. So do you want? Let's go on to that. Let's go on to season 2 and talk about why it exists. It shouldn't exist. There's no reason to exist. But it actually, wait, hold on. Oh no, I'll do that. I'll do that point in season 2. And yeah, also just looking at this monstrosity, again, yeah, I implied that, but Federal Union of Workers was such a lazy ending. Like, I've seen people call it good, which blows my mind because there's actually no effort put into it. It was just kind of a, let's make this final boss more epic. There was no sense in it, and it just kind of happened to the point where I guess I wrote a couple lines of dialogue that made them more sympathetic, but not really. Those were just, that wasn't any character development as much as random lines that happened to be pretty decent. But yeah. So let's go on to season 2, where first off, things to talk about in season 2 where it absolutely benefits. Number 1, there is character. It is not great, but there is definitely more than there was in season 1, where again, as I said, there is virtually no characters. And to an extent, that is kind of a backfire because there's some characters that I handle extremely poorly. But the first thing I'm going to go over, look at this map. It looks horrible. This is something that I have learned specifically through this series that I never would have learned in any of my other series or watching any other mapping videos, and this is a takeaway that I want more people to have. Color schemes matter. If you look at the original, not the original, but this episode 3 where there's no more war map of this, it looks great. The colors pop out, they all fit, nothing looks out of place. It is a good looking set of colors, even if the map isn't stand out or anything. But looking at this, the color clash is so horrible. There's just like Italy and Hungary bordering with basically the exact same color. France turns to a very drab blue. There's just kind of a mess of greens and other colors in the midst of Eastern Europe. Like, it doesn't look good. There's no pop of color, and it makes the series just lose a lot of that it factor that even though it shouldn't have an impact in the series, it actually kind of does, and that's something that a lot more people should take notice of, which is also why I didn't do color schemes for What Lies Beyond, because I don't have the patience to deal with making a perfect color scheme that, as the plot continues to look good, because that is a very difficult thing to do if your plot has significant border changes and regime changes, etc. Okay, let's go over season 2 and why it sucks. I am not sure whether I would say which is the worst season. Season 2 is absolutely more phoned in. I came up with the twist, and I was happy with the twist throughout the entirety of making the series. I'm not really happy now because I didn't develop it at all. It wasn't a twist. It was just me dropping exposition at the very end. But it was, other than that, forced. I felt like I kind of had to make some continuation of this series because it's blowing up and it's what led me here and all that jazz. Yeah, no, the series ended definitively with the ending it had. That was the ending it should have always had at the end of season 1, and season 2 draws it out and makes the ending significantly worse. What I leave the series on as just a dead corpse. Again, even though there was not plot in season 1, you can leave season 1 and say, okay, cool, epic climax, that was good junk food. But out of season 2, there's absolutely none of that. And, yeah. So, again, I will do character overview. Let's talk about France. France is better now. The French dialogue cringiness problem is lessened, though, if I recall correctly, it's still pretty bad. But there is a character in France, and the idea was that there was going to be someone who is originally this macho type who was against the world and very strong and kind of just this prototypical strongman type of right-wing figure that I eventually broke down piece by piece to make after I forget the leader's name, but after his death, to make France essentially broken inside. And that was the plotline that I had intended, and that's the plotline that kind of happened, except there's nothing gradual. Like, very clearly, around episode 8 or 9, I just change how I'm writing France, and there's no sign of change other than France is aggressive to France is sad, and that's it. That's all. It's a sudden change that is not justified at all, and just ends up completely poorly. Again, Hungary, talked about that, and on Ukraine and Cossacks, all those guys are, again, I covered basically their entire plot line in the earlier, but yeah, my thoughts remain the same. It should have been basically the entire plot, and I didn't make it the entire plot because I felt like I needed to make bigger countries more involved, even though the only thing that was actually worth salvaging and putting effort into was that plotline I had around the Eastern Europe, and because I didn't put effort into it, it didn't turn out good. Alright, then there's Russia, who I do want to talk about because it's an exemplar of what to tip you off that your mapping series is not worth carrying on. Russia is dead weight the entire series. They do absolutely nothing. There's nothing of note added, and it is an entire massive country that is Russia. They do nothing because I just leave them there. I had no plot ideas for them, and I don't develop them. And that is kind of a sign that actually you don't have enough ideas for a second season if one of your main characters in the wreckage you don't have any plot lines for. Maybe it's not worth continuing, and maybe it leaves it on a sour note, and that's definitely what ends up happening at the end of Aho. Britain had a lot of problems. I didn't mention this earlier, but I did nothing with Britain early in season 1, which was very weird because it was Britain, and they ended up, like, there was a single episode, what was it, episode 7, where it was like, everyone is turning against me, oh, I'm so sad, but that wasn't really a character arc as much as it was like, shit, I have to figure out how to put Britain in this plot because they've done literally nothing this entire time. And that at least somewhat changes. I appreciate the anti-hero shoe that Britain is filling archetypally, and that is important, but like, I don't do anything with it. And that's, again, another problem. Just because it feels a good archetype does not mean it's a good character, because what does Britain add to this story other than being like, oh, cool, I helped you at the end of the day? It's just not really there. The entire, as was set up with the entire idea of it being the sword and the shield, everything was based around the Franco-Italian clash. And the excess was not really none of the plot that was excess was particularly useful. Wow, I just remembered that there is more to this actual season than Europe. That should tell you how bad the rest of the season was, that I just now remembered however long I've been into talking about season 2 that actually I need to look at other maps because I completely forgot that I expanded to the rest of the world because the rest of the world was not developed whatsoever. But I will talk about the other two somewhat major characters that are here. Italy and Germany. I will go more in depth on them as I discuss the twist because that is inevitably something that has to happen because it is clearly what was the driving force of a lot of the plot. And Germany has no character. Germany had no character in season 1. Not Rosa Germany had character. Imperial Germany had no character in season 1. And they don't really have a character here, which is what makes the ending all the more not good. Because I take this character that has no development the entire time and takes a backseat and suddenly is like, oh, this is the main character now, screw you. And like, that's awful and does not does not help anyone in any situation. And Italy was essentially the main character of season 2. I frame it as if it's the dichotomy of France and Italy, and that was the driving plot point. The entire point of it was Italy, to revolve around Italy slowly taking power and then everything being stripped away. And at that, Italy works. Italy is a fine actor of that plot line, but there's nothing to Italy's character besides that exact point. Like, there's nothing I add to like the mannerisms or anything of Italian speaking that makes it interesting at all. They're just kind of have extreme main character syndrome that makes them just uninteresting. Okay, let me look at the rest of the world map because I forget what I did. Oh, Asia. Okay, let's talk about what I did with Asia. I did nothing with Asia. Anyone who tells you my Asia plot was salvageable is completely wrong. There is literally nothing of note here. The Indian plot was so slapped together that yeah, they're like, why was I doing that? Because I felt like I needed to have a plot line for every part of the world, and I forced India to have a plot line. I forced China to have a plot line because Mongolia is big now, like, and I forced Japan to have a plot line by being massive and then suddenly falling. None of that were plot lines that I was like, oh, this is a great idea. I should probably expand the map. No, that was just plot lines that I was like, oh, I'm expanding the map because of a couple plot lines I have in America. I guess I should also do this. And that's, yeah, just not a great idea in any circumstance. The African storyline, also known as the only kind of almost good storyline. I'm uncomfortable calling it good, but it is nearly redeemable in that there is a driving summary that you could make of the plot that would actually make sense, in that Tanganyika wants decolonization. They team up with Ethiopia, they create Big Lion, and they fight off all the powers, and they act like a kind of sassy character while doing it. Like, that was the sassy isn't... I mean, I don't know how I'd even describe the character, but just like as kind of the more... probably the boldest character in the entire series, while everyone else does not have defining personality. I could at least identify the kind of lines that I feel like I would write for Tanganyika, which is good in terms of character, but otherwise, like, the ending for them is, first off, it's just stupid. Why is there this massive empire in Africa that just forms? Why did they unite with Ethiopia? There's no explanation for it. It just happens. And that's the part of it that completely falls flat, is that the actual what's happening on the map is not explained at all, why they're just going after it, and it's really just a character kind of situation where I tried to make a situation where a lot of the inspiration for this was because I feel like a lot of mapping series just like shaft Africa and just in this Eurocentric way just don't make any major characters unless they're uniting all of Africa, which is dumb, and also what I ended up doing, so I completely fell into that trap. But I just kind of wanted to make a good, interesting African character that people would like, that I feel like I don't see in most mapping series, and that was the only reason for this plot to exist. And I never thought deeper into it because I was like, oh, we gotta find more things. This is a decent plot line. Let me force in an entire new section of the map just to cover it. America. Oh, America. Why were you here? So remember when I said that I felt like I needed to expand to America. Yeah, that's because I had America talk in season 1. That's not actually because I had any good storyline for America. America was just there to be, oh, a big scary fascist man, ooh. But, like, what did America do? There was nothing interesting to America's character, and they just completely fall flat. And again, I keep saying this, but I think this is probably one of the main lessons that you take away from, and that I've taken away, but also that you should probably take away from this, is don't force things that you have not developed. Either think about them deeper, and if there's a good way you can, like, weave it into your plotline, dope, add it. But if you are not at that place, do not do it. It is better to stay simple, to stay to a small scale, than expand to, like, an entire worldview and just inevitably be left with regions of the world that you don't develop at all. And that even if you have some interactions going on, they're so incredibly forced that it kills the rest of the plot around it, because you lose the suspension of disbelief you have when you're only looking at part of the map, when you just see, oh, yeah, that massive America there, why aren't they doing anything? Like, yeah, that's, I think, the general... Oh, and South America. How could I forget South America? South America literally only existed for the opening scene with, in the second episode with Peru. That is it. There was nothing else. I tried to BS reasons for it existing. I added Joden Sivan. Joden Sivan was literally never planned. I was just like, what are interesting things that happen in South... Or maybe I was like, wait, I don't have an Israel. Where can I make an analog of Israel? And I was like, okay, Joden Sivan, this singular town in Suriname. Let me pretend it's the entire nation of Suriname. And yeah, that's basically everything that happened in... Also, everything that happened in all the continents except Europe, essentially, is that I had one idea that I drove the plot around, and everything else I forced. Like, oh, let's have the Altaic countries unite. Like, why? There was no plot development to that. It just happened. And that's what leads to Season 2 being essentially just a bag of filler. So that's why I'm not going to touch on anything other than the European storyline for the rest of this, because nothing outside the European storyline was developed, and I'm not going to pretend it was remotely developed to not waste your time. So, yeah, and I basically, that was a overview of the characters. On the plot. So, essentially the plotline, as I said, was built around the twist. And actually, I should probably talk about the twist and the Nomad first. The Nomad was... I don't know whether I want to say that I'm happy with the Nomad today. I think I am. I think that's... Yeah, I think that's... It took away from the series because it made the entire series revolve around it. But if there wasn't an external series that I forced to exist and I just had it be the plot lines of Germany, Italy, France, and then the Nomad, it would have been fine. That would be something that I would be like, hey, I'm kind of proud I made this to this day. Yeah, the Nomad was a fine character to have that idea of someone, fleeing their family, fleeing their town because their family was killed, and going on a boat and finding this guy. Okay, I take that back. Happy with Nomad's character, not happy with Nomad's plot. Yeah, I completely forced that, didn't I? Because Oasis was just like, oh, hey, it's me, the only person who has found you stranded just in a boat in the middle of the Mediterranean. After, I think I said months, which is very funny, because it made no sense. Yeah, I will go over again, I keep delaying it, but that's because I kind of need to go over it at the end, because it's everything that it was built around. But just basically to frame that I was rushing everything else here and not quitting, because I was like, I need to get the Nomad plot out because I'm happy with this, and I know people are going to go buck wild for the twist. And it's true, the comment section did go buck wild for the twist, but also, like, half the people that watched any other episode actually watched that episode, which was disappointing. And yeah, so on the plot, again, the clash between Italy and France is essentially what everything was built around. There was the betrayal aspect that I had with Hungary that was related to that. There was all these things revolving around it, but that was the idea. And making a plot where I tried to seriously convey France and Italy, who are just slightly bigger than they were in our timeline, actually being the world superpowers was incredibly stupid and didn't really explain anything. Again, because I had massive America, who clearly would have been the superpower over France, but I just pretended it was France because that was the character I developed kind of in season 1, so that was the character I was sticking with. And that's essentially what everything else is. The Ultimate Clash is underwhelming, to say the least. I build up to the idea of a massive war between the two, and that doesn't happen, because the entire thing that happens is that France collapses in on itself, and Italy and the boys just take advantage. That's like clearly anticlimactic, and clearly that kills a lot of what I was building up to. But I did it specifically because I was trying to divert it away from that predictability, which was stupid, because if I'm building suspense for something, I need to make that thing actually happen. And also because the plot that I had, like, it wasn't good. It wasn't an actual interesting twist that was a realism thing to say that, hey, they wouldn't actually go to war, they would do this, and there would be this diplomatic resolution. No, just because the entire nation just collapsed into a billion pieces. That's not a realism take. That's just a different take that isn't war. And still was war, but was less war. And then there's Britain in there who's like, yo, I'm with the nationalists, yo, and it's like, no, I'm not, but haha, I destroyed my navy. Get wrecked. Which is very clearly, I think anyone who can, even if you didn't notice it, you can notice it when if you watch it back over, that every episodes, 6 through 8, are just forced to be around that, because I had nothing else to do. So I just was slapped in that Britain plotline, made everything nice and good, and then made France take over and become this massive superpower that somehow just collapses because the British Navy destroyed itself. Again, not an interesting plotline, not a good plotline. Yeah. So that's all of the terrible, terrible plotlines that we have before the bomb drop. Let's talk about the bomb drop, because that is, again, as I've said, kind of the only reason that I had any motivation to do it, because I thought it was a cool twist. Also, let's just talk about why is there Deseret there? Why are the Mormons revolting, Spicy? There's no purpose to... I hate myself. But yeah. So the thing that I am actually kind of happy with, even though it's totally clickbaity, is that I pretended that part 10 was the finale, which was good, and pretended the twist was the epilogue, because I feel like that at least, like, that was a surprise, even though, again, it was, like, it wasn't a twist in the sense of you watch it back over and you're like, oh, how could I not see this coming? That it was all light out. No, I just did it just to pull the rug out from under you. But it does end up being, like, at least making the epilogue somewhat interesting, because if I just made it like a trailer for the finale, the twist wouldn't be as impactful, because clearly there's an implication that everything is over at the end of episode 10, except there isn't really. Because there's the war with the Ottomans and Italy, which I don't know why I put it in that episode. Let's not talk about that. Yeah. Let's talk about the big one, the Nomad. So yeah, the Nomad plot arc, I'm not sure if anyone actually fully paid attention to it, instead of, like, the 5 people who actually were like, wow, that was a cool twist. Again, like, not to say that, oh, if you actually paid attention, it was really cool, because it wasn't. But to say that I didn't make anyone follow along with it, because it just was kind of, just kind of a vague thing. So, to anyone who completely forgets, I don't blame you. The idea was that, the Nomad fled from the French government, and then got on, and Oasis found a boat and was like, yo, and brought them back to Tanganyika for some reason, and they were like, yo, we're planning our revenge, let's go take revenge. And they go and they take documents from France about their, not documents, excuse me, VHS tapes? I don't know why there's VHS tapes, but they take them because they're evidence of something. I don't know. I only did that so that the presentation style of the epilogue could exist, because I thought it was a cool presentation style. No real reason for it to be that way in universe. And don't want to. Okay. Yep. Let's rip the Band-Aid off. episode 11, Trust No One. First off, remember how I did that weird thing where... Oh, wait, do I not have the there it is. Oh, I was already on it. Okay. So the thing that actually kills me, the epilogue is written so badly. Like, the German-French interactions are so cringy and not at all interesting. And it hurts because, like, the actual substance of the plot is, again, decent, and a decent plot to say that they were working behind the scenes the entire time, and actually this was an entire point and then they kill them, and then Italy. Again, though, that's the only value that has is shock value, and it's not a good twist. Like, there's tons of, like, twists in mapping, but that are, like, either A, like, kind of hinted at in weird ways that you can watch back and see the hints, or B, just a weird take on what you expected. This was not that. This was just something where I'm just like, boom, this is what the Nomad does. He get betrayed, Italy dead. Like, no, that's not a good plot. And, yeah. That's a lot of the reason why Season 2 ultimately fails, because it is a plot that at the core only makes sense with the Nomad plot, and the Nomad plot is essentially something you would put in your 5-minute creative writing prompt thing. Like, it's not fleshed out at all, because it can't be fleshed out, because there's not really anything to add other than what I added, even though it was clearly the most developed thing in the entire series. Like, I couldn't fill an entire episode except for the epilogue and parts of the quote-unquote finale with it, because there's just not enough there to fill an entire episode, so no one had any reason to think it was more than just, like, a philosophical outlog to every episode, and that ultimately, yeah, it kills the entire idea of what you're building up to, because all the characters that you think are important actually don't matter, because it's all based around the Nomad and Germany, who, again, says basically nothing the entire series, which is stupid. Yeah. So, I think that's the general takeaways, or the general overview. I should probably talk about takeaways, because I've been hinting at them, but my intent was to make this, like, kind of a tutorial type thing where I go over my own flaws so that you can look at them and say, yeah, okay. Because I feel like that's the most helpful way to actually get people better at mapping, is to specifically look at a specific series and take it apart, especially from a creator view, where you know I'm not biased, or I am biased because I know, but you know that I'm not, like, this isn't one series where I put more effort into, or I just don't like this person and I gave them whatever. Like, this is, like, very clearly, I know the most about this plot, and what it was supposed to be compared to everyone else, because I wrote it, so I can completely tell you why and how it is complete dog shit. But yeah. So yeah, I already talked about the overview and presentation, that it's not good, it should be better, but I actually don't want the takeaway to be you need to make it much better, because I feel like the obsession with massive maps and animation has gone too far. Again, it's cool, and there are certain things, absolutely not a possible collab that is totally not being planned whatsoever, that would absolutely not benefit from those elements or anything. But if you have, like, a plot that is something as simple as anyhow, like, you don't need big map, you don't need zoom and all that stuff, because you're not using them extensively. And if you're only using them to show off that you can use them, and not because it's an integral part of the plot that you need to zoom in on a specific location, or that you need to have specific detail on smaller scale areas, then don't do it. Don't put yourself through that, because inevitably, like, I've seen Camtasia mess up a lot more than basic video editors, and I'd much rather have a video editor that is literally basically just a slideshow, like my videos essentially are, than Camtasia getting a massive bug that takes you completely out of the interaction just with how zoomy zoom it is. So again, if that isn't an integral part of your storytelling, you should not force yourself to use it unless you're extremely comfortable with it. Again, characters. Something I've definitely felt like I've controlled a lot better since Double B. That all the characters are intentional in that series, that I actually have a plan for everything, even though I shouldn't say every character is intentional. There is definitely, like, some things that are, like, not... Okay, every character that is fleshed out to the extent that they need to be, and they're fleshed out well enough that they are visible characters, which is not true in Aho at all, because I don't flesh out main characters to the level they need to be. I do flesh out incredibly minor characters more than they ever needed to be, and none of them have distinct personalities. And that's definitely, I think, the best way that I could put how a lot of people could improve on character writing, like have a different set of like motivations and stuff. Again, I have to be very vague about Double B because I haven't explicitly stated anything about Double B. Like most things are intentionally left vague up until a later point where they won't be vague. No spoilers. But yeah, so I'm stepping around the gate there, but basically just to say, yeah, make characters intentional, make them feel distinct by just having a set of motivations, having a set of certain mannerisms that they have that make them all distinct, that make everything actually work instead of just being a list of nations with essentially the same character, with the only difference being maybe one talks more aggressive or is the mean guy, because that's not a deep character, that's not interesting, and it doesn't help with motivation. And that also points to dialogue. There are some, I definitely do it some in Aho, that just to like have metaphorical hints at things. That's definitely something that people should do in dialogue more. I've done it a lot in WLB, if that's kind of spoilers, but do you want? I don't care. That's a hint as to what you can do. But yeah, that's like a major thing that people should definitely do more, and would have made this series a lot better if I had some sort of metaphorical hint about the Nomad being betrayed or something. That would raise so much, but there's no hint at that, so it's not a twist, it's just shock value, as I said. And yeah, and the other thing is that there's not even like a stark shift per se, because it is a slow, gradual transformation over Aho and to where I am today. Just to make dialogue less cringy and childish. There's a lot of, I feel like, the problem being unnatural dialogue, which is definitely a problem I had here as well, where I essentially was like, there's not really anything to say, and nothing of this feels either natural or formal per se, so it doesn't fit either box of how I want to tell the story. Which is a problem that, yeah, is something that needs to be addressed, whether you want to make a much more character-focused series, where you do want to go into characters and have them more have human interactions and mannerisms, or whether you want to make one that's a more simulation-esque series, and that you would go deeper into actual, like, formal government talk. If you do neither of those, it kind of ends in this weird medium where it's a lot worse. And the other thing is just, making the dialogue a lot less cringy and childish. And also, something I would highly recommend against, don't talk at all about, like, a country's spirit or the back in the day when we fought in your dialogue, because it's not interesting or compelling, and it's, like, so bad, because, like, every country on your map has most likely fought at some point and has some grudge. We all know about it. It doesn't add anything. Again, it just kind of forces it to be like, if you're someone who's just watching it because you want to see, like, oh, cool, epic Fortnite fight between between Nazi and Britain, and oh, they're talking about that time that they had when they at the beach, when, yeah, that's so cool. Yeah, that's not that interesting at all, because again, you can apply it to any country, and also it's just stupid. It's over personification of countries, which I'm not going to take a firm stance on, because I do think there's an extent to where personification of countries is good, as evidenced by the fact that I've personified countries in every single series I've done except PT. But, like, there's an extent to which it's over personification, where there's, like, a place where it's at the what I will call the mapping romance threshold, where even if you don't do mapping romance, if you have a relationship that's at that level and is just there and you don't have any deeper formulations, like to have something like that in a Nishinium reach. Is that, would you pronounce it Nishinium or Nationium? I don't know, because I've never talked to people in real life about mapping because I'm not insane. But yeah, that it's excusable-ish. And if you are a good writer, like, you will see, like, a lot of what I've been describing, like, you see it pop up in series like Proxima Zepho that are so good because they're written well, not written perfectly, and it is at some extent a detraction, but at least in a series like that where you're not talking about literal countries that literally exist, then yeah, it's like passable. But any level beyond that, it does get extremely cringy when you enter a realm of over personification. That's just kind of me ranting about mapping. That's actually not really a problem that I think fully exists in Aho. I feel like that is a benefit of it, is that the characters are not good, but they are within the bounds of what they should be, that they fit their semi being the leader type archetype, and they fill that. There's not too much of a breaking of the fourth wall where I feel like there's a point where you question, well, what are they actually? Like, I clearly represent them as the government in some form or another, where that's not really a singular human being, but it is, unless it is a singular speech by a human being, which is a lot easier to tell because, again, the only people ever speaking as a singular person are going to be the country's leaders, so that I'll literally have in the text box, so that's not not really an issue. But yeah, I think that's basically it for dialogue and characters. Plot. Number one thing that I can't believe I haven't mentioned. I've said this with a lot of plots when people come to me, and like I don't want to sound like that I'm the mapping guru, but like when my friends are like, "Yo, got this mapping plot, blah blah blah," I've been calling it the kitchen sink syndrome, where essentially nothing feels connected to a singular point. And that is actually something I can't believe I didn't mention until now, because it's actually one of the main purposes of making this video, Spicy, you idiot. Yeah. I need to kind of explain how you end up in a situation of kitchen sink syndrome, what I mean by that, and how to stop it and why it's bad. Okay, so essentially, yeah, kitchen sink syndrome, what I'm, again, calling it, I don't know if there's a better word, but where it's just like a complete mess of ideas where none of them are connected to a singular strand. And it is good to have a lot of ideas, but they need to feel connected in some way. Otherwise, it just feels like you're throwing everything at a wall, which is especially a problem in an alternate history series, because mostly, like, part of the appeal of alternate history is to have a point of divergence, right? To have this point where, oh, we just changed this one event and everything changes. But then when you make a bunch of changes that aren't realistic, it does completely turn into kitchen sink, where it just becomes this mess of ideas that doesn't end up having any real weight and loses the weight of just saying, this is what would happen if the Zimmerman telegram was accepted. Because no, if that wouldn't lead to Jodin Savan existing. It wouldn't lead to massive Manchuria. Massive Mongolia. That's just wrong. That's not how anything would happen. And obviously there's speculation that you have to have, and there's creative liberties you have to take to make the plot interesting. But when you go that off the rails, it becomes clear that you're not really looking at a map that is of Earth. It looks like Earth, it has similar names of Earth, but you're not actually based around anything, because everything has changed to the extent where nothing is based around anything on any human plane. And, yeah. So, why that's bad, because I feel like I've thrown insults at that, but I haven't actually explained the reason why it's negative. First off, creation relationship. It makes it a lot harder to get invested to when you have some of those plot lines that just feel completely dead weight, that don't add anything. You're like, why did I add this? This just makes the map gunked up. This doesn't add anything. If you have something that's based around either a singular point of divergence, or has a singular theme, has a singular point where everything is revolving around, where everything fits together and none of the plots feel out of place, it's a lot easier to deal with. And otherwise, if you're just, especially I see this where there's like, you have time travel and alternate history and aliens and things like that. No, like, I'm not going to be interested in that, because if you're adding multiple weird supernatural elements, you are, by necessity, having zero that are actually compelling, because you're not, like, explaining everything, because you're like, yeah, this is how time travel would work if there were aliens. And it's like, I don't care how if time travel worked if there were aliens. I care if time travel worked, or I care if there were aliens. I don't care both at the same time. And that, yeah, and then from a viewer perspective, it takes away from a lot of the iconography and just the impact that you can have. Because if you have this hook of, this is the point of divergence, or this is the central build-up of a nation, that's compelling. You can have people be like, oh, I'm interested to see that. But if your hook ends up like, I don't want to say there's no hook for a hook, because there is a hook. It's the Zimmerman telegram. But that ends up being bullshitted because it's actually not used. It's not expanded upon, and even though it's good to hook people, doesn't actually drive the plot forward, and it makes it a lot harder to get invested into the series when you have no real connection to all the plots together. When, if it's, again, singular event in the past or in the future or right now that shapes everything, it's a lot easier to get invested around, because you can say like, oh, I don't know that much about this country or this person or this time period or this ideology, but I can at least understand that they've developed it from this singular point, or it's going towards this singular point, where I'm like, yeah, that's interesting. I can understand it because I'm interested in that singular point, therefore I'm more interested in the plot lines that revolve around it. And that's essentially, yeah, the best way to avoid that is to have a hook that is real and that is not bullshitted like Aho's hook is, and that sticks around, that is everything there. And if this is kind of a main reason why I actually think alternate futures that don't have a, actually do it. I'm not even going to say kind of. I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings with this, but it is true. If you do not have a premise with your alternate future, or if you do not have a premise with your alternate future, with an alternate history, it's fine if you're doing a point of divergence thing. That is inherently interesting, and if you actually stick to that point of divergence, yeah, sure, I'll stay invested. If you are just saying, okay, this is my AFO, where we do the future of the world, and there's no weird hook, there's no anything about this is the plan, this is the supernatural event, like, genuinely, it is not watchable in the year 2021 to me. That is very harsh, but it's just true. I can't muster myself to watch unless I'm doing, like, I'm not, whatever. I can force myself to watch, but I don't enjoy watching any sort of lack of a hook series at this point. Like, I can enjoy non-hook series, like, I don't even know whether I can enjoy non-hook series. There's series that have less of a hooks, like I'm gonna point to Korean's AFO, but at least there's some hook. There's some hook of Ukraine's power, and there's some hook of nuclear future, but that's mostly just because they're good plot lines in and of themselves, and not because there's any real central hook that defines it. But yeah, you need some form of hook, even if it's not going to be that central. But if you do not have a track record of making great plot lines, I wouldn't recommend throwing like 20 plot lines in and just hoping one of them sticks, because then it will end up kitchen sink. That only works if you are actually experienced enough to have good enough skills to connect them and make them feel natural next to each other. So yeah, that is an excessive overview on dodging kitchen sink syndrome. And on the rest of the plot, the plot that is extremely bare bones. Yeah, do not make the best way that I would put about how to avoid having this style plot that I do have in Aho is by just like actually thinking it through at first and not forcing it just because it's interesting alternate history, which is again a lot of the reason why I switched to something like WLB, because I don't feel like I'm forced by any of me being a history nerd, because there's literally no history nerd information in there, because it's a world that I made, that I created, and is, yeah, I'm basing everything about my own lore. So nothing about it is coming from some other source that I'm just interested in and I don't develop, because I know I have to put everything about this world onto the paper, because none of it can be implied, because none of it is actually what is happening in real life. And that is a general recommendation that I would have if you're genuinely having troubles not falling back into this kind of fan servicey, oh my god, what if Germany won World War II type of plot line, is to just go at an alternate world, go at an apocalyptic series if you so desire, go into a differently framed series, even one that's like based around literally one country and people inside of it. Do something like that where you don't feel forced to listen to your history nerd woes and talk about this interesting country that has this alternate plot line, because that's, yeah, it's not going to cut you anything. It's going to make the series inevitably a lot worse, and it's going to mean that whatever hook you have is probably shit, because if you're the hook that you have is just based around the fact that you're interested in this time period or interested in this country or whatever, it's not going to work. The plot line is going to completely fall apart, and yeah, it's not going to be serviceable, because you're, again, falling too much of a whim to the history nerd woes that we definitely all fall into, of wanting to make this this powerful thing and whatever, because that kills any sort of plot significance that it can have. Yeah. I think that's everything that I wanted to say. No, that's not everything I wanted to say, because there's one more thing I wanted to say. The one thing that I'm very, very happy with AHO for is that people watched it. Yeah, let's get into meta about YouTube algorithm stuff. Woo! I miss the validation of having a series that gets thousands of views. I'm not gonna lie. I am happy with WLB. I wish it had more views. I wish it had AHO level views. And that is a lot of what you have to weigh, because everything I've talked about with the history nerd type of syndrome, with the maps that are kind of weirdly all over the place, there's an extent to which that's the stuff that gets views. It's definitely not the stuff that gets loyal views, but it is the stuff that gets views, that are people who just are coming to watch your cool, funky alternate history with no real interest in the plot. And that's a lot less interesting, and there's no reason that it has to be in video form. Like, genuinely, if you just want to make an alternate history, do it in a singular map where you have a text description of everything. Don't force yourself to have characters with dialogue. It is that simple. If you do not have a plot around your alternate history, don't make it a mapping video. But clearly, that's not the perspective that a lot of viewers take, because a lot of viewers see this and think, oh, cool, Germany, World War I, let me click on this. And I know I come off as I'm mocking the people who are subscribed to me. I'm not. I totally understand, because I've done that before, where I'm like, ooh, this is a slick thumbnail with like a period that I'm interested in. Let me click on it. And as opposed to like, oh, it's alternate future of America. I don't know what that means. I don't know where America even is. I'm not going to click on that. I distracted myself with how bad that joke was. But yeah, that I'm not saying that's like a bad thing per se, but it is a thing that you inevitably have to weigh, because things like a World War I series, as is very clear, will get views, because people are Kaiser Abus that love to see this alternate what if Germany won situation that isn't that compelling if you don't have a plot behind it. There are good World War I series. I'm not going to say that there aren't, but it's so oversaturated to the point where none of them are really, if you make a new World War I series, it is incredibly hard to get people invested in it other than just the alternate history, which, again, if you're going to do just that, make a map, make a text post. Like, you don't need to put it in video, because if your actually interesting alternate history idea gets mucked up with dialogue for a non-existent plot, then it's going to be worse. But yeah, that's something that you have to weigh, to find things that people are actually interested in, that are more, that pop out to the viewer more than, say, I don't know, a completely unexplained apocalypse in America that has not really any regions that people are particularly familiar with. Oh god, who could have done such a thing? yeah, that's always the stuff that's going to get views are the more standout and flashy things that will appeal to someone who isn't really like deep in mapping, and that's okay. That's fine. I don't think everyone needs to be to that level, but it does mean, again, there always has to be this balance between appealing to the algorithm and appealing to your own personal creative drive, and that depends. And I think that balance almost always does, after a while, just shift to creative drive, because personally, I'm someone who thrives off validation, what little of it I get. I'm like, every time that I look back at comments, I'm like, oh god, yes, people actually care about me. Woohoo! And that's something that kind of, as sad as it is kind of a driving force to just see that like there's a big number, and that's cool, and I did something. But I am much happier making WLB than I ever was with Aho, except maybe like the first episode and the epilogue, because I am actually happy with where it's going, and I don't feel forced to put things out because I'm taking it in my own pace, and this is my goddamn story where I'm telling it in a way that I know that I won't be happy with it come a year's time or something, but I will at least be able to say that it is a I don't want to say I won't be happy with it because I don't feel like I can say that definitively because it is a fleshed out plot, and as it stands, I am happy with it. But at least that I will call a plot, unlike what I've been calling Aho, which is not a plot. And that's, yeah, always going to be, depending on who you are. If you are the kind of person that just frankly does not have the drive to do something that is just a creative vision that you have your own little passionate side project in, and you want to like chase the clicks and do things and still get enjoyment out of making more surface level series, that is okay, but that is something that you always need to weigh, because I feel like those things are almost directly in contention of making quality mapping and making algorithm mapping. I don't want to say viewed mapping, because you get these cult favorite mappers who have this force within the community, but when you get someone who literally just pops up in your recommended because there's a lot of people watching it and doesn't have that drive of people who really like the series, then that makes it fall apart a lot more. And my computer's about to die, so I'm just going to end this here. I've said everything I wanted to, but yeah, that's going to be it. Catch you on the flip side.